Could you describe a recent situation where you felt that a leader could have benefited from additional training or guidance in culture building, leadership, or both?
A recent example? Well, the recent example would have been a few years ago because I've not.
Hmm.
Uh, well, it's not recent, but that's an example that struck me. Um, that's when I just started to work in HR in a recruitment division because I was in the diversity and employment equity and inclusion section before. Anyway, we had a process and it was a targeted process because there was a gap, all right, according to the labor market analysis. And so I had to brief the hiring managers because they had their bias and thought they were going to get a less qualified candidate by doing so. So there was a briefing, awareness that I had to do first, and they bought in reluctantly, but they were gonna go along. And there was one candidate who was from a different culture. I can't remember exactly. All I was going to say is that shaking hands is not something they do. And one of the manager turned around and said, handshake is not that firm. Right.
Mm.
So I didn't say anything at the time because he was speaking under his breath. Make a long story short, at the end, when we scored everybody, that candidate blew out of the water. They really saw his expertise. And the one we talked about the handshake, and I said, you realize in this culture, this is not something they do. The fact that he touched your hand is big, it's big. And I went, oh. Anyway, the person was not the top candidate. He was not hired. However, because they understood him better, they got to, you filter, the filter was dissipated a bit, a
Hmm.
lot, that they called them and said, no, you didn't get a job. However, there is all people you should call to see if you could get a casual position. And eventually, maybe you could get a permanent position. They really felt bad that he didn't score top, and that wasn't
Hmm.
something that, anyway, it's just the way the tools were created, and
Hmm.
they realized the tool was not the best. So that's okay. Lesson learned there as well.
Hmm.
Realize they need to put weight in this section as much as they did. But I knew there was an impact because I did receive an email telling me, thank you, because they don't know how often they've done that before. So they had an awareness.
Right. So the leader was basically, um, to use one of the few French terms I actually know, he kind of committed a faux pas that he didn't even know he was committing, and by becoming aware of that, then that helped him be better as a leader. Now, I can
Not
totally
only as a
relate.
leader, he was an ally because he was talking to other managers.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Right. So then that affected his relationship with people at the same level as him.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Nice.
like I said, that's an ally because I didn't have to do because he lived it. And he said, oh, no, 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 no. So he was doing his thing. So, yeah, this is why it is important.
Right. And I like the fact that you said he lived it because there's nothing that convinces people better than experience versus ideas. If I say, here's what the science says, or diversity is good because of this, and you go, yeah, whatever. It's like, well, let's do an activity where we make use of, because experience both good and bad. I'm not just talking about positive and negative experiences, but experiences that actually move us in the wrong direction. We say, well, we're experienced. Let me give you an HR example. Daniel Kahneman, I think it was in Noise, I think his most recent book. It may have been that one. It may have been Thinking Fast and Slow, but I'm pretty sure it was Noise. he basically said that many HR managers go, well, I'm very experienced. I can spot a great candidate and I have a high level of success. But here's the problem, because Kahneman's all about decisions, right? Behavioral economics. He's all about decision expertise. But one of the weaknesses that goes for humans, period, is we are, as a species, tremendously overconfident in our own judgment and skill. And what happens is when you actually look at the how many people, the candidates that any hiring manager hires against what their actual success rate and their self-perceived success rate is always very skewed. Is like they think that most of the people they hire, and it's like turns out they're about at chance or worse. And sometimes people, because they're experts, is another example of something that can work against them. That is, if they're too overconfident in their expertise, that they're not willing to look at alternatives or track the negative outcomes. That is bad picks. You pick an employee, they turn out to be bad. You can't just track your successes because, that's confirmation bias. So it was interesting that I got off on a tangent here, but it was really relevant. It came back to um, nothing helps you learn like experience, but experience isn't always reliable. That is, your experience may be misleading you. Just because you think it's true, that's when you want to go back and also look at numbers that you hadn't expected, both the positive and the negative. That's what it
There's
was.
not, yeah, it's true. And nothing is, I'm thinking in French now. Nothing is, what's the term I'm looking for? Um, when, like we say, medicine is not a perfect, nothing is perfect. We have to also, when we look at results, we have to, not having with in a very narrow way of looking at, we have to broaden our scope to see
Hmm.
what were the influence, not just looking at the result as is,
Hmm.
what were the variables, what were things that might have influenced, what was the environment? Given the
Right.
environment, this is the result we got, instead of just looking at the result. Because
Right. Yeah.
that changes also your perspective when you put the environment, something that looks bad as a result, and you look at the scope of the environment, say, actually, given all that they had to deal with, all the challenges, all the variables they had to deal with, what they came up is actually quite good.
Right. Yeah. Context always matters. When I learn something new, I'd be stupid not to adjust it based on what I just learned.
So nothing is absolute. It's not
Nothing.
looking at it. Nothing is absolute. And we're not all operating that way, because people gets enground in their position and their beliefs, and that's
Hmm.
it.